Municipal Airport Plan Implementation Advisory Commission is called to order at 6:01 p.m. on Tuesday, November 12, 2024. We are meeting in person at Austin AG headquarters. Present and in person are Commissioners Clements, Hilliard, Reimer, Hunter, Sokolic, Romaniak, and Jones. The first. The first item on our agenda is public communications. This is an opportunity for anyone to provide up to 3 minutes of testimony on any topic related to the Mueller development that is not on today's agenda. And the first person signed up for public communications is Preston Tyree. Preston.
Thank you, Mike, members of the commission. I want to talk about pool fees tonight. The cost of lifeguards this year was $116,320. Next year, the budget's $140,500. Most of the people we've talked to agree the current situation places an unfair financial burden on Mueller property owners, but no one seems able or willing to discuss ways to address it. Just to give you the short numbers, I've got 4 pages of closely written text here, but we're not going to do that. So, the cost of lifeguards this year was $116,320. That is $119.67 for every public member who came to our pools. And that's the reason we have lifeguards. If this was an HOA pool, we wouldn't have to have lifeguards. The public swim days, there were 86 at Ella Wooten. And there were only 41 people that showed up in those 86 days from the public. The John Gayne pools had 85 days, and only 43 people showed up. That's not very good. I'm sorry, 41 days with nobody, and 43 days with nobody. If the city wants Miller's pools to be open to the public, then the city should provide lifeguards during the public pool season and assume the liability risk. If the city chooses not to be a partner in operating the pools, and I understand why the city would hesitate to do so, then we should make it available to all residents of Miller. Do you realize that the people in the rental properties don't have access to the pools without paying a fee? I pay a fee. I pay $12 a month to access the pools. I haven't been to the pools yet, but I still pay the fee. So there are ways to make that happen. I hope that we will bring this up. I know we're taking it to our council member, and we're taking it to the city council, and to try to arrange something. The other thing is, we have not been able to find any organization in the city that can show us an agreement for this. So some people say, oh, we've got an agreement with the city. Nobody seems to have a written copy of that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Preston. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from our October 8th meeting. Commissioners, I hope you have had an opportunity to look at those minutes. And are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? There's been a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any questions? Those in favor of approving the October 8th meeting minutes, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The minutes are approved. The next item on our...
Just for clarification, who was the first again?
Courtney.
Thank you, Courtney.
And Rick was second. The next item on our agenda is a briefing which should help clarify a new understanding, shall we call it, from the city clerk's office regarding when the public can provide testimony on agenda items. Kate?
Kate Clark with Financial Services Department. I'm actually going to adjust the camera because it's focusing on the wrong spot, and Jill's going to do the update. So.
Thank you. Jill Fagan, City of Austin Financial Services Department. So just a quick clarification. Last month, we had gone through and talked about commission policies and procedures and agenda topics and when we sign up and when we don't. And at that time, when we gave the briefing, it was true that staff briefings, there was no public testimony on staff briefings. However, right after that meeting, there was a change in city council policies and procedures that do now call for public comments on staff briefings. Therefore, moving forward, we will have public comments on all staff briefings. However, if a staff briefing is meant to be more of a discussion item amongst the commission, we are instructed to post that slightly differently. It's not just a staff briefing, it's a staff briefing and discussion. So our next agenda item is going to be an update on Miller's Parking and Transportation Management District, and you'll see that we posted that per the clerk's office instructions for not just a staff update, but also for discussion. And that should allow, commissioners, as you have in the past, be able to ask questions of staff, but also discuss more amongst yourself. And then at some point, we would take public testimony on that briefing. Any questions? Great, thank you. We just felt we needed to clarify. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jill. But hopefully everyone is aware of that. It means there's further opportunity for public input on these topics. All right. The first discussion item this evening is one we've been looking forward to for some time. It's a more detailed staff briefing on the Mueller Parking Transportation Management District. And the two representatives from the Park Department are here with us. I'll let them introduce themselves.
I think waiting for this for some time is an understatement, to be honest. I apologize about that. So I'm Ryan Royal, I'm the Parking Services Program Manager. And so I'm here to, this is Curtis Rogers, he's a project coordinator. He works with me and I literally can't do this without him, so I appreciate him. I'm here to give an update on the Miller's Parking Transportation Management District. And so we're going to get going on it. The agenda really is to go over some transportation and public works organizational changes, as well as the representative for the committee, the PTMD committee's update, which Curtis did a couple months ago when we were supposed to come, and I had a death in the family, and I apologize for not being able to do a full update then. But he was able to give an update on who the new committee members are. And then we will do a, it's not, oh, that's right, because it's not connected to the computer. There we go. And then we're going to do a district financial update, and then an on-street parking expansion plan, and then we'll go over next steps. So, TPW department updates. So, the Parking Enterprise Division is moving from under Business Support Services, which is under Acting Director Dan Malberg, and it's moving to Transportation Operations Services, which is under Acting Assistant Director Louis Liff. And so this helps us operationally, so we'll be with urban forestry as well as arterial management and signs and markings, which will help us have more control over things within the right of way. And for our division's sake, we have had some turnover. Our enterprise manager did retire at the end of last year. Joseph Hodgery is our new enterprise division manager. And so since then, my position has kind of changed a little bit. Curb management has been moved underneath me now, along with meter shop. So I do all on-street parking operations, and then off-street has been moved off underneath Joseph directly. All right, and so this is sort of just a refresher to go over the new committee. I'm really glad. Curtis did a lot of work to form this committee, and I'm really glad we finally have a real PTMD committee with representatives from the community, and so this is awesome to see. And now the financials. So last year the PTMD made about $160,000 through our fiscal year, which ended September 30th, and it has about just under $1 million available for projects. And we did one project last year, I believe, I don't think that was the safety improvement until this year. And then we did do the rapid flashing beacons at East 31st and Tilly to improve the safety crossing. We did that, it was about $25,000. So we still have plenty of money in there to spend, so we're looking forward to, looking at that with the committee throughout the year. We are looking to change up the way we kind of do PTMDs, try to do annual reports each year, maybe even quarterly, and then the goal is to eventually set up project plans. And now that each of the PTMDs have a good amount of money in them to do projects, we want to start setting up project plans throughout the fiscal. And then with us being merged with Public Works, as well as us transitioning over to transportation operations, it helps us bridge some of the gaps to get some projects done. And I'm going to pass it over to Curtis.
All right, thanks, Ryan. We're going to go over some of the maps, and the next slide is actually going to have more detail, but the first slide here, I just want to go over some of the color coordination so you know what you're looking at on the next map. The proposed hybrid parking is the dark blue that you'll mostly see in the neighborhood around Page and Ruiz. Proposed meter parking, you're going to see more on the west side. It's more the commercial district around the hospital. It's going to be some of the new stuff. And then no parking is obviously some curbs that you know of, but also we have it represented in some of the intersections. And then the existing parking is the dashed line. That's sort of what you really have a harder time seeing in the middle. Now the hybrid parking, if you've been to the South Congress area, if you haven't, I highly recommend you check it out in the neighborhoods. We have the advantage of being the second mover on that, so we're letting South Congress really kind of work out a lot of kinks on the hybrid parking. But it really recognizes the residents and their parking needs. It makes it resident only in the evenings. It also recognizes that we will need to offer some kind of community parking during the day, so we have paid parking during the day. And I think I mentioned last time that we also are able to lean on the app, so we're not actually having to put a pay tower in everyone's front yard. And that way it gives us the ability to give people more options when it comes to paying for parking and not have to have the infrastructure that it usually takes to put in paid parking. And like I said, here's a more detailed map. A lot of this has been planned, especially the expansion of the paid parking to the west, which you see represented in green. And you'll see some of paid parking a little bit on the apartment side and around the square on the other side. But mostly the biggest thing is going to be the expansion of the hybrid parking in this neighborhood. And what's it going to get there? What's it going to take to get there? Obviously, we've been working hard at this. Ryan's been at this a lot longer than I have, so we are very excited to see this happen. Expansion within this neighborhood, we are going to be doing a letter campaign to make sure everyone's aware of this. We will be asking for feedback. It's not required, and we're not needing to test the feedback to get a certain response. It's really just informational, and we'll be collecting feedback on that. And then the goal is to be implementing in spring of 2025. From a technical standpoint, there is an ordinance we need to do. There was a presentation in the Mobility Committee in October, Urban Transportation Committee this month, and then code changes we're expecting to council in January of 2025. One of the biggest factors that we know is important to this community is going to be Sunday. That's a new thing for Austin. It's a new thing we're doing in South Congress right now, and we're going to be really excited to get it going here for reasons I know everyone knows here. And then one key component to that we don't have today is going to be Sunday enforcement. We are currently working on adding a new officer shift so that we can actually do a better job of making sure that all of our rules are being enforced on Sundays. And with that, happy to take any questions.
Commissioners, questions for the park folks? Yes, start with Ken.
Does this one?
I think so.
I just want to say thank you. We're still here to help if you need anything.
You're welcome.
Yes, Andrew.
So the color that was shown as hybrid parking is determined, it's coming. There's not further studies to determine if it's happening.
Well, there will be further studies on it. It is coming, I can say. It's needed. We will be, speaking to the residents a little bit more on it, but it's coming, yeah.
Commissioners, other questions? Yes, Rick.
how will this be conveyed to people that are especially from outside the neighborhood who come in? I'm assuming there's signage to come, or, okay.
That's a great question. Yes, there will be signage. You'll see more of so in the west, the green area, well, the map's not up there, but when the west of Mueller Boulevard and the south and the west, it will be the signage you kind of see, more of the pay to park. There will be some pay towers. And then inside the neighborhoods itself where the hybrid is located, you'll see signage. There will be no pay towers. It will be mobile pay only. And it would be mostly paid parking during the day. And then at night, it will transition over to resident only. And so that you're looking at probably, the hours are different in Miller, but it would be like in South Congress, 8 to 6, and then 6 to 8 a.m. is RPP, or residential.
Yes, Dave?
Remind me, is there, in a hybrid, is it going to be an app-based approach to parking, or is there going to be the towers, or how's that going to work?
We'll be doing app-based, no towers.
Gotcha. And just sort of at a macro level, if we think about the hybrid, like what's the goal of the hybrid parking? Are we trying to, is parking oversubscribed on those streets? Are we trying to free up space so that people have places to park, or what's the thought?
We're trying to tackle turnover, so there's a lack of turnover on the streets currently. The RPP does not include Sundays. So the farmers market puts a lot of pressure on Philomena, Page, Ruiz, and Page and Ruiz themselves do not have RPP at all. And so that's kind of creating the issue. And so you're looking to create turnover by balancing out the area to allow people to find parking during the day, but not necessarily pile up on only streets that have unrestricted parking. So that's sort of the idea.
Gotcha. I mean, do we feel like we're mostly solving the problem for Sunday? Is that kind of like, I'm just kind of thinking about the other days of the week.
I would say no. I think I think Sunday is going to get the most impact, for sure, especially when we add Sunday enforcement, but I think it's going to help balance out the entire area. Because right now, especially saw when the construction was going on off of Maddie, the RPP didn't start until 5, you saw it front loaded. And so people, construction workers, they would park there during the day all day, and then they may or may not leave based on if enforcement comes around. And so that's sort of the challenges we're trying to do. We're trying to expand and mitigate parking and create sort of like a new status quo to help balance the whole area.
Commissioners, other questions? All righty. Well, no, anyone signed up for public communication? Public testimony? Well, thank you very much. We look forward to updates as the new system is fully implemented, and look forward to additional public feedback on how those funds can be most wisely used.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the annual presentation on affordable housing programs at Miller. It'll be made by Catellis, the Mueller Foundation, and Home.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Brian DeLiesel with Marketing and Communications for the Miller Development, working on behalf of Catellis in the City of Austin. I'm here tonight not to give a development update, but instead to help tee up the annual presentation for the Affordable Homes Program, which I'm very happy and proud to do so. The lion's share of the presentation actually will be done by Francis Ferguson, who is Executive Director of the Mueller Foundation, and Robin LaFleur, who's the Vice President with Homebase, who I believe was here last year, but maybe didn't present. So she's going to give an update related to on the rental side of things, while Francis is going to focus a little more on the residential side. And I won't go through the entire agenda, but for many of you, this will be some information that we've shared before from last year. You'll see a lot of that, but there is some new information, and we also have a new commissioner, at least one here, hoping some new information for Commissioner Reimer. And just so real quickly, we'll go a little bit of the background and kind of how we got up to this point. As I mentioned, Ms. LaFleur will give an update about the rental affordability. We'll go through the ownership update similarly, talk a little bit more about the Mueller Foundation itself, and then some of the transition items that are in the works. But before we get to the details, let's take a quick look to discuss kind of the team's responsibilities as a whole. And we're starting with the vision of Mueller, which is to be an interactive, mixed-use, mixed-income community that will be a model for responsible urban development, offering a compact and pedestrian-oriented alternative to land-consumptive and automobile-dependent development patterns that could influence the pattern of growth within Austin. That's a lot of words there in that sentence. You're all familiar with the 6 goals of the community. The one that, of course, that applies most to what we're talking about here this evening is the goal of diversity and affordability. And then as you're listening through the presentation this evening, you're going to hear a lot about the last requirement in the MDA, which is the good faith effort piece of it. Just to kind of remind you of what the MDA requires, which is not a whole lot, frankly, within the MDA, although what's there is certainly meaningful. The MDA requires that 25% of all of the homes, whether it's apartments, condos, or single-family homes, are part of an affordable homes program, and we have checked that off the list. For the ownership requirement, it's 80% median family income for 1 year. We have certainly extended that. And then for the rental requirement, it's 60% median family income for 5 years, and you'll hear that we've extended that as well. But again, the MDA does ask that the Mueller team make a good faith effort to extend affordability beyond that time period and beyond those figures, and you'll hear throughout the presentation that's really what we've been focused on, is going well beyond what the expectations were in the MDA. And with that, I'll turn that over to Francie.
Oh, good. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Good to see you all again. Who's new? All fingers pointing on me. My name is Francie Ferguson. I'm the executive director of the Mueller Foundation. So what I want to do with the next 2 slides, because we're going to have 2 slides that are sort of background and current focus of the Affordable Homes Program. Then we're going to switch over to the rental program, and Robin will catch you up on the rental program. And then we're going to switch back to the home ownership program. Just wanted to get you ready for that. So most of you heard this last year, but I don't think it ever hurts to repeat this. And for our new member, I think it's really important for you to understand some of the history on this, although perhaps you already know all of it. So when this development got started back in the early 2000s, this notion that has been developed here was really radical. It was not the way people built communities. And I don't know if you were here, but you will remember that the folks who used to build Buffington Homes and Bill Milburn and NP, all those guys, you would drive into the new community. It was entirely residential, and the first 100 acres were priced from whatever, back then, 150 to 250, and there wasn't another price in that. And then as you drove through that neighborhood, you'd get to the next neighborhood, which was the 250 to 350. Anyway, things were very income segregated and very use segregated. Residential was residential, commercial was commercial, and incomes were not mixed. Even though back in the longer, like when our grandparents grew up, that happened all the time. So this was called traditional neighborhood development, and this vision that had come from the community was what was the design for Mueller was based on. As Brian already said, the MDA, while it had an aggressive goal of 25% affordability, That was aggressive for public-private partnerships. It only had a 1-year requirement for the home ownership and a 5-year requirement for the rental. And fortunately, everybody, including the city and Catellus, thought that that wasn't good enough. So, but I also want to remind you that there was no land trust law in Texas. There was no practice in Texas for how you could do long-term home ownership. There was beginning to be a practice in America called land trusts and shared appreciation, but it was in its infancy. So Mueller and Catellus and the city decided to pick up a practice that was being experimented with at the housing department and expand it. This took a substantial financial investment because all the documents had to be created and Fannie Mae's approval and Freddie Mac's approval so that all these documents would actually result in loans being made against them. So, and to remind you what those documents are, because it's very important, those documents are recorded documents on the sale of every affordable home. They are recorded and you can look them up on the public record. For a long, long time, those were a second lien with a deed of trust that's recorded. The lien notes themselves are not recorded, just like your mortgage is not recorded, but your deed of trust is. And a purchase option, right of first refusal, held by the Mueller Foundation. Which means that when an affordable home comes for sale, we have the option to purchase that home before anybody else does. And that's a recorded right of the foundation. So with these two documents, and in the last few years, starting in 2022, because the world had changed, and now there was a land trust law starting in 2011, and the city had expanded their own shared appreciation program, and so had other places in Texas. And so now what had become a norm in Texas was a restrictive covenant, which is a different but similar tool with all the same rules. And so we switched to a restrictive covenant because it means we don't have to be a lender and all the costs of being licensed as a lender. It also allows us to charge a small fee, which right now is $250 a year or $25 a month, which helps to sustain the stewardship function, which we have expanded, which I'll talk more about that later. All right, now back to the Wayback Machine. You may remember that I'm going to now do Group 1 and Group 2. So you may or may not remember that back in 2008, when these homes were starting to be sold, the affordable price was $165,000, give or take, depending on. Well, you could buy a house across the street for $165,000 that would be unrestricted. So there was a decision made that we were bringing something to market that was really different, and it was being done in a way where almost all the risk was on the builder. The builder was not being subsidized by the city. They were not getting a chunk of money to pay down the cost of the home. They were being told you can sell a bunch of market rate homes, but you've got to also sell these affordable homes at $165,000. And yeah, we know there's a home across the street for $160,000. So anyway, as you can see, the deal was really different back in 2008. And so but these builders needed these homes to sell. This was their dollars going into building those homes, not the city's dollars. And so we looked around at what was going on in the city and how affordable homes were getting sold and who was getting qualified. And so we decided that in this first phase, that what was showing up in this early stage, remember this is early stage of this kind of product, that the notion of restricting the appreciation to 2%, which is what it is now, might not sell to a Texas public that had never really heard of this. Like maybe Habitat was doing it on 10 homes a year, and maybe the city was doing it on a couple homes a year, but it wasn't, there was going to be 100 homes. And so we did what we can now affectionately call Group 1, which was if you're going to pay 70% of the market price, you're going to get 70% of the appreciation. So that is Group 1, and the reason that's important is because now it costs a great deal of money to preserve those homes. in the order of $200,000 to $250,000 because, of course, those homes have appreciated a lot. And so they get their 60 to 70%. And so when we want to preserve those homes, it takes a big check. We knew, well, those of us in the affordable housing community, that that was not going to be sustainable and it was going to be very difficult to preserve if Mueller succeeded, which it quite clearly quickly did. So by 2013, which you'll remember there was a small global financial crisis in the middle of that, we switched over to what is now the 2% program, which was much more aligned with national practice. But the primary reason people do like the kind of 2% is because that's what median family income tends to go up. So now if you've sold a home at an affordable rate of 165, 75, 200, whatever, and you're going to sell it 10 years later, well, if it's gone up 2% a year in value and MFI has 2, well then there's a reasonable chance you can sell it again to at 80% of median without having to write a big check. So that's sort of a story of some of the things you'll hear about Group 1. Well, what the heck is Group 1? Well, that's Group 1, and then everything else since 2013 has been on a 2% per year appreciation, which then, in 2016, there was a big whoo and a bunch of years, but in 2016 an agreement was reached with the appraisal district to honor the 2% in the values, but to say that the Group 1, they are treated like other homeowners. They're getting lots of appreciation, and so their values can go up 10% a year like everybody else's. So that's a lot of the story. And then the Mueller Foundation, by the way, was started in 2007 in order to have an entity, an independent, nonprofit entity, to be the named steward on all these documents and to have the staff and the partners to actually handle preserving what is now 680 homes and will be more by the time we're done. It's a very large portfolio of homes. It's the largest portfolio of such homes in Texas, you know, by a pretty good margin. So that's sort of designing the program and kind of how things have evolved. So I started as the executive director in 2021. I thought that was going to be 3 years. I guess I'm not 4. It looks like it'll last a little longer. Having had a career in affordable housing, and having been the person who helped plan, like, how do you actually fit 25%? It's not just an automatic, like, how do you do that? So anyway, it's been really an honor and a privilege and a delight to come back at the end of my career and serve as the transitional executive director for getting the foundation now through all this last transition. I know you guys are all doing all the same stuff on the POA and, you know, thinking all this through. So last year, I know we introduced Home Base. They became our partner after many years with Community Wheelhouse. Home Base is a nonprofit, and so positioned with Habitat, which is an institutional nonprofit in the space of homeownership, and therefore positioned to be a, you know, really long-term nonprofit realtor, licensed realtor, to serve some of the realty needs, because every one of those homes we preserve needs a realtor. And so Home Base represents the Mueller Foundation. They started last March working on resales, and then by July they were taking on Catellis' work with all the new sales. So we were doing resales, Catellis had them doing new sales. And then they also manage our affirmative marketing prospective buyer pool, which means they do all the income certifications, which is a lot of detail. And so they guide buyers through the contract, they meet with all of our sellers. They also do the apartments, which Robin will tell you about. They sit in on every one of our marketing Zoom sessions along with Brian and me. And those are not every month, but most months. And then this year, which isn't up on this slide, we are now in the process of deepening their role specifically in the stewardship of defaults. So there's a lot of stewardship functions. When someone wants to refinance, they have to come to us to make sure they don't borrow up into the value that is not theirs, right? If people want to modify their homes, they have to come to us. If people are struggling with an HOA assessment, they come to us. And we have emergency loan program. So there's a whole set of stewardship that we do. But this year, what we've been really focusing on is strengthening our toolkit around the occupancy defaults that do occur. People sometimes think that it's okay to move out and rent their home. Well, it's not okay to move out and rent your home. And so we send notice, and we now knock on doors, and we have switched attorneys because our former attorney, who was wonderful, is not a litigator. And so you need a litigator if you're going to be ready to move on all this. And so Winstead, who has historically written all the documents for Mueller, therefore knows all the documents, and there's a lot of documents to know. So to have Winstead be our attorney, and they have a whole practice in HOA, and so it's been a really nice partnership, and Alex Valdez is also on the board of Habitat, and so it's sort of a nice synergy in terms of strengthening not just our capacity, but the sector's capacity for shared appreciation stewardship. So that work has been a real focus for this year and on into next year. And then, of course, the same conversation as last year, the whole sustainability question continues to be things we nip away at. And part of sustainability was stewardship. So we kind of bit that one off this year. We're not quite done, but we've made a lot of progress. And then on into next year, the POA has been in transition too, as many of you know. So one of the things that we've been active on their transition committee, and we're in the midst of finalizing an actual agreement, written agreement. The attorneys like to call it a stitching agreement. It's a pretty simple agreement, but it acknowledges that we have a working relationship that must occur. Some of them are just administrative tasks, but some of it is also a spirit of collaboration. Like we're going to have non-voting members on each other's boards, because we need the POA to have a strong affordable program, and they need us to have a strong affordable program for the success of the community. So I'm really pleased that the POA and the foundation are setting up their own relationship, sort of independent of Catellus, who will go away. So that's sort of the story of how we got here and what we've been focused on. I'm going to take a pause. I don't know if we should take questions only at the end. Is that how we do this?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay.
We'll take all the questions.
Okay. So I'm going to take a pause. Robin's going to talk about rental housing, and then I'll be back to kind of just wrap up on ownership, because the meat of what I want to tell you, I've told you. The rest of the slides that I have are kind of just a lot of numbers, which you can look at and consume on your own time, but I'll just hop through what they are. Okay?
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Are you gonna? Awesome. I'm Robin LaFleur. I'm the VP of Home Base, as introduced. So there is a wide variety of affordable rentals here in Miller. There are 9 communities. Well, excuse me. There are 12 communities. One of them currently under construction. Rivette down here is pre-leasing. And the distinction is, if it's in white font, it's currently under our purview. If it's not, it's either under construction or in the stages of pre-leasing. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Right now, Miller has 25% of all current and upcoming rental units that qualify or that are considered affordable
for folks that qualify. And with the market rate rental properties, there's a minimum of 10%, but with the majority of them at 15% of affordability units or containing those units. The long-term affordability ranges from 40 to 99 years, with the majority of them being at 50 years, and that generally starts at the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. Predominantly affordable rental developments have reached even deeper affordability, serving even lower population, even lower MFI populations, such as the Jordan that does provide some transitional housing. And then Mueller is a certified smart housing development. I think you're all aware of that fact. And then to the side there, we have the MFI affordable renter percentages. And there was a question here as to that 1% that falls into the 60 to 80% of the median family income, and that is because upon renewal of a lease, the tenant's income can go up to 84% of the median family income. So, moving on, this is broken out by community. The ones there with the kind of little triangles beside them are are monitored by the state of Texas. And as you see, when you go down this list, you get to the bottom and you have our beautifully highlighted 25%. So we have met the goal of 25% to date, and the next community numbers are factored into that number as well. Then the upcoming community from the MI. And then let's see. And then as far as I did mention that on the previous slide, the apartment complexes that have the little arrows by them, those are all tax credit projects monitored by the state of Texas. And then Catellus also continues to monitor the unit designation between the various MFI percentages. Then there's also the income verification step, and that was to be completed by a third party for all market rate developments. That is currently being done by Homebase, and then raising any concerns that come out of those, the income verification process directly to Catellus. Monitoring, the market rate developments submit monthly rent rolls to Homebase. Those rent rolls are for a high-level review of vacancies and also just to kind of confirm rental rates are within guidelines. Then there's an auditing component. So the City of Austin audits smart housing, multifamily developments, the mini, and then we've got an auditing component. City of Austin audits, as mentioned earlier, the multifamily developments, and then, sorry, I think I just repeated that one. The annual audit on both sides of the rental housing. So, and then we get down into reporting, and per the Mueller MBA, there are 2 times a year that the affordable housing reports come out, and those are in June and December. It is of note that the Mueller project team and the city housing staff are working together currently to determine the city's role and oversight of the multifamily developments post-MDA world. So, and I ran through that kind of quickly, but that's a high level of the rental options and affordability here in Mueller. Thank you. Sure.
Okay, we're back to homeownership. So, as with the rental, there is now a really big mix of the unit types for homeownership. Lots of row homes, which are like townhomes, which are townhomes. Lots of condos. We've talked about the Mueller homes, which are the big houses that each have 4 to 6 apartments in them. But now there's condos that look like what you think when you hear condo. There's Pearlstone, which is the second one down on the left, which actually now offers like some studios, I believe, as well as 1-bedrooms. So there was never a small product before. It was always 2s and 3s. Then there's, of course, some detached, fully detached product, like yard homes and cottage homes and garden homes. It only took me about 3 years to get it all straight. So anyway, they are in fact all over the campus, from the tippy north to the bottom south and east and west and all in between. So this next slide again goes through what you already know. It's 25% affordable. We use a 30-year requirement. I can explain more about that if you're interested. And then of course the self-sustaining model that we already discussed, 2% with a steward. In addition to the 25% that were sold under 80%, starting in 2012, 2013, Mueller added a little extra layer of what's called workforce, because the market rate was pulling far enough away that the missing middle was showing up at Mueller. So in addition to the 25% under 80%, there are also some homes that are sold at 120% of median. And those are called workforce. So you, I assume, have access to this and you'll be able to see the numbers about the MFI of the owners. But I think it's worth noting that, 15% of them, 7% are under 50%, another 10% are under 60%. So there are owners who are even lower income than 80%. The 47, the big yellow one, that is not surprisingly 70 to 80%. And then there's about 15% that are between 80 and 120. It's probably worth noting that we also have a policy that we can resell. As part of our affirmative marketing project a few years ago, we looked hard at what we could do to improve the diversity of our buyers. And one thing that really came out was that what happens when you limit sales at 80% is there's somebody at 82%. Well, at 82%, you can't buy at 80%. And you also can't get any down payment assistance. So you both, you're locked out on the income and there's no assistance for you anyplace else. So we really felt that it was appropriate, given the wealth gap in America, that we resell also at a price at 100% of median, which is a little between the two, the workforce level and the affordable level. And it's really enabled us to help diversify the ownership. So the next slide is, a bunch of numbers which you can look at. And as with the rental, we are at 25.7% at 80% of median. And then up to 28% when you include the 120%. And the next slide is, the spread across the units. You will see that the biggest types are the Mueller homes and the row homes. So, but there's also affordable homes and all the other product types, and including the condos now. So this ties to the report that was given to the city on June 1. So on that date, there were 639 homes in the program. But because of all that stuff I told you about, rights of first refusal, 2% appreciation, we have actually served 864 families as of that date. That's because there were all the new homes, 682 new homes, and 182 resales. Now, we report this based on the June 1 report so that this report is consistent with the other report that the city has. But just between y'all and me, there's actually now 680 homes in the program, which means that, there's been a lot of, Homebase has been super busy closing new homes over the last year. Things kind of slowed down during the pandemic. It's kind of amazing that Mueller has survived a global financial crisis and then, kind of blew through the pandemic too. So there have been, to answer the question, What's that release to market? Since the beginning, there have been provisions that have allowed us to release homes to market. As of June, there were 443 released to market. Most of those were long ago, in the early years. There was people trying to sell during the global financial crisis and no one could buy. So there were a bunch of Group 1 homes lost in those early years. More recently, then there was a moment when we sold 13 homes out of part of the Mueller home product in order to get those to 50-50. They were more than 50% affordable, and it was stressing the business model of the condo. And then more recently, in the most recent years, quite honestly, the only way to buy a Group 1 home is to sell a Group 2 home. So sometimes we are selling a Group 2 home in order to preserve some of the very desirable Group 1 homes. So, but 43 over 20 years. Not quite 20. The next slide kind of captures some of what I was talking about the affirmative marketing effort. And, 30 different information sessions over the last several years, an average of 60 participants with an outreach to 245 local organizations. And then the website was updated and the information was updated. And so our results showed up as we got a much more diverse set of buyers than we used to have. Finally, our board is up there. This is people who have been dedicated, these are community leaders who have been dedicated to this mission since the beginning. Jim Walker, who came with us last year, was part of Mueller before Mueller was Mueller. So it's a terrific board to work with. They're very committed to this long-term vision of the sustainability of this organization. And then we have additional operating partners, Homebase, ProTax, who represents all of our buyers. We pay ProTax an annual contract so that they all have tax representation with TCAD. We have an accountant who keeps our books every month and an auditor who audits them once a year, and the audit is up on our website. We, of course, partner with the POA. I mentioned Winstead earlier. So it's a great team and it's a great effort and it's very committed to the long-term sustainability. I believe that's the end of this presentation. Oh, look at that. I think I've talked about all that. Home sales, resales, compliance management, working with the POA, maintaining a close relationship with TCAD. So I won't walk you through all of that all over again. Oh, and then this slide. This is nice. Although again, it sort of captures the story that I already told you. Telling you what we worked on this year, which was updating more policies and the MOU with the POA and really working on compliance stewardship. So, to the extent that anybody's concerned about our financial sustainability, we have multiple revenue sources. One is that every property sale, including commercial properties unless they're sold to public entities, produces a 25 basis point fee that comes to the foundation in support of our mission. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, the new RC allows us to charge a small stewardship fee. And then, what's not up on this slide, it doesn't really come to us, it's how we compensate Homebase. Just like with any real estate sale, there is a transaction fee. And so, because they handle the sale portion, they receive a 3% of the affordable sales price. It's not the market sales price, right? It's the affordable sales price on the resales. And then while it's a revenue, but it's dedicated to preservation, is what I was telling you about, that sometimes we sell a Group 2 home in order to preserve a Group 1 home. But that goes into a dedicated account for that purpose. Our audit is nearly complete. We did some going back and forth with the auditor because the 2023 audit is the first audit that's going to have a lot of information about the restrictive covenant, which actually changes the way we report. So we were working on getting some language clear about that. So looking ahead, in terms of ongoing, what we're paying attention to in the coming years, obviously there's the retention of affordability, which I think we've already talked quite a bit about. The primary risks that we're evaluating over the coming years is what would it take to preserve the rest of the Group 1s? It's a big number. What does it take for us to stand behind the physical plan? Like what happens if a foundation fails and an owner's not equipped to pay for it? So we've been kind of collecting our thoughts about that and are going to be digging into that more next year. And then there's always some risk with all this where interest rates are coming back down, which is good, because there for a minute when interest rates were at the peak, the sales rate, it's like bonds, right? The interest rates go up, the sales prices go down in order to be affordable. Well, when interest rates were up, the sales prices we were selling at weren't enough to even cover the 2% appreciation. So there again, we were writing checks. And so that's something that we make sure we are prepared to do so that people can actually succeed in selling their homes. Because if there's not someone to write that check, they can't sell their home. So those are the kinds of financial risks we're evaluating in terms of long-term sustainability. Finally, on accountability, we have an independent board. Our goal is to retain as many homes as possible, with the majority of those being under 80%. Along with, sometimes a home doesn't sell. There's some very small homes, which this year, nobody wanted those very small homes. And so because nobody wanted them, we ended up having to release them because sellers have to be able to sell. We are a 501c3 independent board. We're working on next year, we're probably going to start a process of going around and reintroducing people to us. We think that a lot of people either don't know we exist or kind of think we are part of Catellus. And so we are going to begin a process now as Catellus is nearing, and the POA is shifting out, independent, that we too ought to go out and get introduced to people so that they know that we aren't going away just because Catellus is moving on. And it will also give us a chance to listen well to what's needed so that as we think about what our next leadership needs, both board and staff are, that we'll be hearing what the community is thinking. That'll include council members, it will include neighborhood leaders, it will include the POA, it will include our residents, and maybe some other people. And then we're going to begin to have an annual report that will be kind of an impact report so that that can be publicly available, because I don't know if we'll be continuing to report to PIAC for the rest of our lives. If PIAC doesn't exist, we'll have a publicly available report. Okay, that's it.
Commissioners, questions? We'll start with Dave and then go to Ken.
I'm curious on the new condo product that is affordable home ownership. Where did you guys land in terms of, or I guess it's ultimately maybe it's not even you, but where did it land for the fee structure, the condo dues? Are those subsidized via the other owners, or is it based on the square footage model? Or, and again, this is the ownership piece, not the...
Yeah, so I think there's two answers to that. I'm going to turn to Robin on Pearlstone. Keep in mind that Pearlstone is really different. Pearlstone is a traditional, great big building with one roof, stacked flats, and it only has 15% affordable. So that's the one Robin's going to speak to. And then I'll speak to the couple other condos that are coming out.
So, thank you, Francie. So for Parkside, which was developed by Pearlstone, Parkside did have within their fee structure for their management, for their condo association dues, it was reduced. So it was at a more affordable price than some of the market rate, condos around it. And I'm sorry, can you repeat your second question? It was also in relation to...
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the question. I was just curious whether or not the condo dues are being subsidized or not. And
Yes.
just given the history I've had with it, it just seems problematic. And I was hoping that maybe just a smaller unit, if it was a per square footage price or something like that, that it would just reduce the problems that it created previously.
Right. So it is based on square footage, but at a subsidized rate.
But I always call it first floor. It's actually
Parkside,
Parkside.
yeah, Parkside.
They're only 15%. So it means that you don't have that, the situation at Miller House where you've got 50% of the people subsidizing 50%. You've got a full 170 market rate homes, and you have a single building. So on a gut level, I am inclined to think that for Parkside, that's going to be sustainable, that balance. Now, there's 2 more condos coming on that are much smaller. And we raised those concerns to Catellis, in fact, we were talking to them today, and strongly advised that on those smaller condos, which aren't 50%, but do have quite a lot of affordability, that they just do a square footage straight out, get things priced with a full loaded fee, so that we don't quite know where it'll land, but that was our advice, so that you don't have that sort of internal subsidy.
And I recognize that you guys don't really directly control that. You're sort of in an advisory capacity. The more I've thought a lot about this over the years, and sort of like, what does a condo do? It's basically me paying for maintenance and yard work and whatnot. And we have plenty of other affordable homeowners in the neighborhood that are not in condos, right? But they don't get a discount when they go to Home Depot, or the lawn guy, they don't have to pay him a discount.
And even the row homes, right? The row homes are done on size.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So it's only the Miller homes.
Yes, yeah. All right,
And it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Understood. The other question I was going to ask was just around, you mentioned, and hopefully I captured this right in my brain, but you mentioned during the situation where interest rates were rising and home prices were kind of a little bit pushed down, you were saying that it sounded like the foundation was having to cut checks to the homeowners, and I guess I was sort of lost on that because I think what you said is, my understanding is that there's a max of 2% appreciation that homeowners can expect, but I thought that was a max. It's not guaranteed 2%, is it?
As long as the market value exceeds the 2%, then they get the 2%.
Okay.
So, as you might imagine, the market value far exceeds the 2%. So if the affordable price at the time,
I'm trying to follow, go continue.
Yeah, so if the house was purchased originally for $200,000, and that's $4,000 a year in appreciation, and it's 5 years later, so now it's supposed to sell at $220,000. But if this price was set when interest rates were at 4%, because someone using the incomes, right, we crunch backwards to be sure that the sales price fits the income. But now, if interest rates are at 7%, which is what they were, and so now it might be that the current incomes crunched at 7% can't afford 220, so we're selling it at 215.
Okay.
Well, but clearly the house on a market rate is worth lots more than 220. So in that scenario, they get their 2%.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. That makes sense. I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kathy?
I just wanted to say that I've worked so much with both of these women, and they are incredible, and they listen to the homeowners. No, both of you. Do not point at just one of you. It is both of you. Your connections that you have in the city, y'all listen to the homeowners. You bring it to us, you bring it to the POA, and we all work together to try to find solutions to keep our program sustainable. And that is not something that I've ever seen anywhere else, and I can't believe that it's functional in the state of Texas, and it's incredible, and I can't wait to see what else y'all do in 2025 to just continue to help this program. It is a very, very challenging program to maintain.
It's such an onion.
It is very
The number
complicated.
of layers that council people, they're like POA and HOA and.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, and I've had the honor of working with y'all on, and with Juliet on the resales, and it's an incredible process, and yes, it can be so, so challenging, but the dedication that y'all bring to this program is so important and cannot be understated, and I just really wanted to say that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
And just so you know, in response to some feedback we've gotten, which may or may not have come from Kathy, that we have Homebase has upgraded the home buyer education materials that are given to buyers in advance and have shifted the way they're going to do their one-on-ones, because they always go through a checklist to be sure, like, look me in the eyes, 2% a year. You've got to live there, you can't rent, you know? But they're going to shift it and hand out the educational information. They're also going to require that before closing, they take advantage of some education course out there. A lot of them are online, just like your driver's ed. And then they're shifting from I'm going to tell you to you're going to tell me. So, you know, I know this program's complicated. Can you explain what the 2% is? Because if someone can't explain it, then they probably don't understand it. So anyway, that's some lessons learned as we continue to work on how to be sure that the buyers really understand, because obviously Miller has become such a high-value community that there's a degree to which people just want to get in. And so thank you for all that work.
Oh,
Next, Corky and then Andrew.
Haven't watched this program, this old program, over a long time. And I just want to thank you for restoring the confidence that we always sought in the program. It's a jewel. People talk about it. It's a jewel nationally. It's a jewel in the city. It's a point of pride in Miller. And I don't know it from the technical point like Patty does. I know it from more the sense of confidence that's been instilled. I'm thankful for you for doing it.
Thank you. And stay tuned. Pretty soon, we're actually going to update our very, very old website. We're not rebranding. It's not fancy, but we are going to update it, and there's more quotes from residents. And so anyway, we'll alert you when that happens so you can alert PIAC.
Okay, Andrew?
Is there a concern or an issue about the tremendous amount of work that Catellus apparently does on the rental units, the tracking and it just seemed like there was a slide where Catellus does a lot of the work. Will
So,
that become under
I don't know if
the
Brian
aegis of the
knows what that
foundation, you think?
so really, a lot of the work is done by Homebase and then sort of reported back up to Catellus. So, and then Catellus reports that to the city and whatnot. But we're the ones that are doing, you know, the reporting function kind of in partnership, but really, you know, behind the scenes.
And of course, the fact that Catellus and the city are actively figuring out where that, because right, the real question is, who's got the axe if there's a real problem? And the foundation is not in the position to have the heft. We are in the position to have the heft with homeowners. We are not in the position to have the heft with, national real estate developers of multifamily properties. So we're glad that Catellus and the city are working on figuring that out.
And as a quick aside, this is something that Homebase does for other communities outside of Miller in terms of like rental compliance.
Rick?
So I've learned something tonight that apparently I've been misled for years. 17, I guess, since the first folks moved into Miller in 2007. So 25% of both for sale properties and rental units are in the affordable program of each. Because I have been somehow led to believe that overall it's been 25%, but there were probably more rental units that were in the affordable program and fewer for sale.
There are, it might be, I think the thing that has been said is that it doesn't have to be 50% of ownership and 50% rental. But each portion of the portfolio, ownership and rental, must be 25%.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
We're happy to make you happy.
I
We
am.
think it's incredibly cool.
Probably misled, I mean, I'm not a Miller resident, I probably led a lot of people who ask me about the affordable program, and I am not, I mean, I know a lot more than people who don't live around here, but that will be something that I will be able to tell people from now on, and it's so good, so
Yeah.
thank you for that.
And one other thing about that, part of the trick, of course, when you were going to try to fit 25% in, we kind of felt like there ought to be a way to do it on an inclusionary basis with the home ownership. But the numbers, you just can't, remember, we weren't supposed to have any subsidy. So you can't just tell a multifamily developer, you know, apparently you can tell them to do 10 to 15%. We were seeing around the country 10%. 15 was more aggressive, but, you know, but 25% just makes the numbers go crazy for those developers. So that's why there was the notion that if you were really, plus if you're affordable housing in the rental place, you want tax credit properties because they can bring in the added services. So having those 3 tax credit properties did mean that you could work on the inclusionary pieces, properties at 10 to 15%, but still hit your 25% with your tax credit properties, and create a lot more of a service package for those folks too. So I think it's good.
Commissioners, other questions? I have one, in one of the earlier slides you referenced the audits that the city of Austin provides, performs.
Was it? Okay, let me see.
Or else it's free.
That may be it. I'm right on call.
Oh, it's
Thank you.
I think it's the
Yeah, the auditing,
audit,
yes.
the income certs.
I actually am a little unclear as to what that bullet is referring to, but I know that on our, the work that we perform to ensure that somebody is in fact eligible to rent at one of these communities, those files are you know, individual income packets, if you will. Those files can be audited for accuracy, just by the city to confirm that household that moved into that home was within income guidelines. Did you want to add to that, Christina?
Does anyone else have any additional information?
I mean, that's what it is. It's that the city can audit. So it's not just that Homebase is checking. It's that the city can audit Homebase. And I think they do it on a sample basis.
It is.
They don't re-review every one, but or else they might as well.
And also related, are there any, because the project's obviously getting close to the end, are there any other anticipated tax credit projects that we think might be built at Miller or other affordable units?
That's a Brian question.
Yes.
And the answer is to be determined. We do still have plans for more residential. There is a plot of land that's across from the school and the Jordan and near Jesse Andrews that will be residential. We think it'll be, a good portion of that will be on the affordable side, but we haven't had active discussions yet to figure out exactly what that's going to be. The parcel of land that's at 51st and Berkman has the potential to be commercial or residential at this point. And if there's residential, my guess would be that there would be some component of affordable in there, still kind of in our effort to keep 25% ongoing, whether it's rental or for sale, but that's still, both those parcels of land are still to be determined. They may or may not be tax credit.
Commissioners, other questions? All right. Do we have anyone, no one signed up for public testimony? All right. Well, thank you all again very much. We look forward to the, oh, I have one other question. I almost forgot. Litigation. You mentioned you have a new litigation attorney.
Well, what we have is we've moved our legal relationship primarily to Winstead, and they have litigation capacity. And so it does mean that now, it used to be that we'd get started with somebody, and if it got real difficult, then we had to go find a litigator. Well, now we don't have to go find a litigator. We've got a litigator. So it does mean that that whole process of going, oh, well, you don't want to play ball? Well, then we'll just send you over to our attorney. All that can just now happen instead of me going, which I tended to do. Like, oh my God.
So it's now more, just a little more cohesive.
You may want to address this is a rare situation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it is rare. But, you know, when you have 680 homeowners, you know, you're going to have a few who kind of thought it was a good idea to move out and lease. And so we are, in fact, going through a process of tightening up policies that the board's going to be reviewing, and we anticipate sending out a mailing to everybody going, hello. And we've tightened up some tools for going and knocking on doors when we expect. And so anyway, we're just trying to get a richer toolkit to be sure that folks do know that if they're not living there, they're going to be asked to move. Or they have to move back in, for real. So anyway, we're working on several cases, and I think every year we'll be working on several cases, although maybe there's perfection out there.
We can hope.
We can hope.
We can hope.
I mean, 700 homes is a lot of homes, so.
And just to follow up on that, in the last year, how often had you had to contact a homeowner about not actually living in their home?
We're working on 5 right now. And, you know, and then there's probably 5 more to work on, but it's not like it's, you know,
A large percentage.
A large number.
Yeah.
But they each take time, so just in order to manage them, you know, we kind of see them, we start getting inklings and then we take them on, but we try to get some resolved. And typically it gets resolved because people go, oh, all right, I'll sell. You're right, I don't live there anymore.
Any other comments, questions? Well, thank you all. It's one of this project and the whole affordable program, I think is one of, I agree with the statement, it's the crown jewel of this development, and I don't think the success for Mueller would be complete without it. And so we always look forward to hearing from you and look forward to hearing updates as you adjust the website and as new homes come in.
Awesome, it's always nice to report to you. Take care.
The next item, which is an action item, is the final presentation on our transition-related recommendations to City Council. As a reminder, Commissioners, we discussed them initially, I think back in August, with the initial transition work group. The transition work group is actually formally ending this month. We discussed them again in more detail on the recommendations last month, and the work group went back, made some revisions few, but not, there are no substantive changes, but made a few revisions, and it's now, and you've all seen it because it was in your City of Austin email, it's now available for final presentation. Corky, would you like to make any comments about this final version?
Thanks. There we go. Thanks, Mike. Yes, we did make, based on the comments we got back from the council commission, we went ahead and made our changes in the form, but not in the content, basically. So even though we pulled some apart, we did those after we did conversations with city staff and getting it informed that we could actually send it to council. And so actually we had a few, well, the only comment I received since the last time it was presented was from one of our own transition committee members in conversation. So none of the intent of the prior presentations has been changed, but the form has been changed. And as I thought about this, I want to thank, in particular, the committee, who's been very attentive and very busy early on, in particular, to help us identify those key areas that we needed to address. And the fellow commission members with feedback during our meetings and outside the meetings, particularly early on, and the public, who really helped us understand how some of the recommendations we were making needed to be emphasized. And some of those people are here in the room tonight. But we had quite a bit early on, quite a bit of comment there. So unless there's any question.
Yes, Kathy. Yes, Kathy.
From our affordable housing report tonight, should item number 4 say city's housing department or home base? I just want to make sure it's correct. And does it even matter? I don't know.
When I read this, well, I hadn't thought about that really, Kathy, until you mentioned it now. Let's think about this.
But our recommendations are going to city council, so,
Yeah.
it would, there had to be some city role
In there. I was going to say, it seems like the audit, there has to be oversight by the city. I think we should leave it there. I hate to remove that because as we discussed it early on, that was the real intent, was to make sure the city had a stake in that audit and responsible for the assignment, particularly of the rental units. Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Commissioners, other comments? Yes, Dave.
Yeah, this was pointed out to me just a bit ago, but on number 1, at the end there, we call out the 2 pools, and we have Emma Long, we'll need to correct that to Ella Wooten. So when we get to the chance to amend it.
Duly noted. Completely different park.
Yes, really. Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for that, Dave.
Yes, Rick.
I got involved in this as sort of an editor, I guess, I don't know, and doing a little bit of the formatting. And it was very, very late in the process, so it didn't make it to our final draft here, but on the resolutions, the number of resolutions at the end, I thought it would be more appropriate to break the branch note, so this is not number 5, deed branch park pavilion and Miller Central building to the Miller POA. I would think it would be better to maybe put those in separate items. I'm pretty sure that the plan for the pavilion is that it go to the POA. And with that said, using it as a source of rental revenue secretary of space, and I am not that familiar with the building, that would be a good place for there to be POA offices in the pavilion. It's not?
No,
Okay,
No.
so that's all.
it's legal
Okay.
line. Yeah.
But I still think it might be a good idea to break them into separate ones.
Yeah, fine.
They're separate.
Yeah,
We had them separate at one point.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Okay, so
Thank
how would it read then? Just make sure we got the wording straight.
To the Branch Park Pavilion, to the Miller POA as a source of rental revenue. Um, But it's obviously not going to be a place, you're telling me that it won't be a place for the POA to
Manage.
run, have offices. So that would just be one of them. And then, okay, go ahead, Dave.
And the Mueller's deed the Mueller Central Building to the Mueller POA as a location from which the POA can manage, from which the POA can manage.
In one rendition, we actually talked about rental possibilities at the Mueller Central. So, I mean, that's why I think they probably got these together. We split them up. Do we have to have that tonight to do action?
Yes, but it sounds like if you're all agreeable to his suggestion about how to split the two up into one, keep it just real simple sentence
Yeah.
and regarding a separate sentence on,
Everybody's clear? Everybody clear about what we're doing here? Okay.
Can I follow up, because I am not completely clear on this. So right now, the POA offices are in the Miller Central Building with Catellus,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, there's some time, they're not going away soon, because I don't know that that's a place that's gonna be available. I do think that maybe there are other places that could be considered or could yet be built. But I'm not gonna get into that a whole lot, because then I don't know that much about what the POA needs in the region space, but it's like, I'm not sure that's putting it in the Mueller Central Building unless it's to maintain it for as long as you can or something like that. Am I making any sense?
Speaking of that, yeah, I've got something to say there too.
It's kind of a, hey, this would be cool if we got this,
Yeah.
so we're gonna leave it in. That's our plan.
Yeah,
It's a want,
Okay,
not a.
okay.
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
a-
there've been
it's
some
a-
discussions about the location and sourcing of stuff, and the idea of using Miller Central and renting out if needed, we could rent back, was pretty much smoothed out in the, so where are we? We leaving it alone?
We're still working.
Break it in half.
You're breaking
Alright.
it into two.
Right, but leaving the section in there about clarification. All right,
so is everybody clear on that? Per Dave's edit.
Yeah.
Just separate it out and keep the Mueller Central very simple and just saying that's a recommendation
yeah.
to give it to the PO. Don't get into the details of what,
Right.
because that's to be determined, whether it's done to be
Okay.
determined. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
And we
Okay.
corrected the Elwood references.
Mhm.
Any other comments from the commission? And before we go to public testimony, I did want to make a note, and I'm sure you all saw it in your email. We received public testimony both last month and written testimony this month regarding other issues related to those two pools. The passage of this document does not preclude the city from working with the POA. It sounds like there are definitely some issues, not only cost issues, lifeguards, but also how the pools are licensed. And I think since this is a unique situation with pools maintained by the POA, originally paid for through TIF funds, so that's public financing, it's a one-off. There's nothing quite normal about it. There may be other examples somewhere, but I'm just not aware of them. So that doesn't include the work continuing to address what sounds like some pretty legitimate issues on that topic. If there are no other comments from the commissioners, is there any public testimony? There's no public testimony on this topic? If there are no other comments, does anyone want make a motion make sure the motion includes all of the edits we agreed to earlier in our discussion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Any further discussion? So we're all clear on what we're voting on and what edits have been made. Those in favor of the amended recommendations, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The recommendations are approved, and the text will be updated and sent to City Council, and we'll work with the staff to make sure that the updated version accurately reflects our discussion and decisions. The future agenda items, as everybody knows, this is our last meeting of this calendar year. We'll be working with staff on agenda items for January and February. Obviously there was an election last week you may have heard about, which also results in some changes in City Council, which means people will be up for renewal, so there will probably be some changes on this commission sometime in the spring. However, a reminder, all of us, our terms, if you have an expiring term, it does not end until after the February meeting. So look forward to seeing everyone in January and February and perhaps later. In the meantime, if you have suggestions for the January meeting, just send an email to your City of Austin email. And if you haven't done so, you might want to also make the necessary changes to your city email passwords pretty soon, so that you'll actually be able to get emails in a couple of months. There are a lot of holidays in between now and when we first next meet, so I hope you enjoy as many or all of them as you desire. It's been certainly an interesting year, even more than usual, and I look forward to seeing everybody at the start of the new year. With that, is there a motion to, and one other thing, appreciate all of you, but also appreciate all of the people who take time from their schedules to attend these meetings. A lot of things happen at local government, and most people aren't even aware of it, and we're fortunate that we have people who care enough about this community to join us and to let us know what they think. So thank all of you. With that, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second. I hear no objections. Meeting adjourned. Happy holiday, Christmas, New Year's, what have you.